thank you all for joining us at the Sustainable Business and Social Impact Conference 2013. We're all really excited to get the day rolling. I hope you all enjoyed the keynotes this morning. So thank you so much with all of the choices this morning for choosing the panel that we're about to see, the democratization of giving, donating in the digital age. I'm happy to introduce Joey McMahon, who's going to be moderating for us today. Joey is a second-year student here at the Fuqua School of Business, but he's also the founder and CEO of The Monday Life, which is improving the lives of hospitalized children through donations made every Monday, right in your Monday morning. Thank you so much. Let's do it.
If we could just first give an applause to our speakers for coming.
I haven't done anything to earn
I looked up how to be a good moderator last night on Google, and one of the tips was, it says, remember that it's not about you. And I got really relieved because I thought about all the times that I've spoken in public, and every single time the entire audience has fallen asleep. And so I was so happy. I said, it's not about me. Coincidentally, they're just all really tired. So you guys feel that. It's not me. So I'm really excited. They're probably one of the most excited I've been at Fuqua ever. If there were 4 people to meet in the social space, these 4 are at the top of the list. I mean, we're very, very fortunate to have them here. We have Missy from Donors Choose, Susan from Causes, Paul from Better World Books, and Sonali from Kiva. And so as they speak today, I'd ask that you guys think about questions that could help you in your lives, because they're a resource for the next hour and 14 minutes. And so we're very, very lucky to have them. And the theme today is the democratization of giving, donating in the digital age. And if you're like me, you had to look up like half of those words, but after I looked them up, I realized that it's really about a trend moving from a small amount of large $1 million donations driving philanthropy to really what the internet has allowed, which is a lot of different opportunities. One being matching models like Come Shoes, or cause marketing like Ethos Water, where every bottle you buy 5 cents goes to the Clean Water Fund, or even peer-to-peer giving campaigns like Kiva, like Donors Choose, like Kickstarter. So that's kind of the theme of today, and I think we all can use that in whatever we do to help us save the world or whatever enterprise you're working on. So the structure today, what I just real quickly, I'll get out of the way, is if the speakers wouldn't mind going through their background and a little bit about their lives and why they're here for this particular panel. And then what we'll do is instantly open it up to questions for you all, if you have any, as you listen to them speak about their lives, and then we'll also add some core questions that we've identified. So thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Joey. Good morning. I'm Missy Sherburne, and I work with DonorsChoose.org. I've been with the organization since 2003, and I was employee, or still am employee number 3. So I've been with the organization through it very much being a startup to being an organization that is today delivering close to $50 million worth of resources and experiences to public school students across the country. So it has been an absolute gift and amazing experience to have been able to be a part of the organization through us going from a place where we were trying to deliver $1 million worth of resources and experiences to now close to $50 million. Prior to DonorsChoose.org, I was at the Kennedy School. And one of my classmates is here with us today, Marty. Prior to being at the Kennedy School in Boston, I was on staff with Teach for America. I was a Teach for America Corps member in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was on staff both in Baltimore and then here in North Carolina. So my passion for DonorsChoose.org in many ways stems from my experience at Teach for America. Having been a teacher and walking into basically an empty classroom and told, you've got to figure out how to make this work, and knowing how hard it is for teachers, those myself as well as teachers that I work with, to figure out how to make it work when you don't have the resources that you need to be successful with your students. The second piece that for me is really why I love DonorsChoose.org is that interaction between technology and philanthropy, which is obviously why we're in this room today, which is why I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, because it's amazing what has happened in the field of philanthropy because of technology and what we've been able to harness today, both with individuals and corporations and foundations across the country. So that's a little bit about me.
Hi everyone, my name is Susan Gordon. I was employee number 5 at Causes back when there were some really awkward empty offices and cardboard boxes. But now they're 65-person company in San Francisco now. We started and we've had quite an evolution as well, from sort of a Facebook application, working on the sort of, well, we called it viral crack at the time, but just getting as many people as possible to take different actions, to a real transformation towards getting meaningful actions, taking meaningful, real offline impact in the world. Generally, people at Causes talk about sort of the individuals, both the action takers who are signing petitions and who are clicking on videos and educating themselves about new issues in the world, to sort of individual organizers who are saying, I'm an animal rights activist, or I want to get this park saved in my neighborhood. So both sort of the individual activists, the nonprofits, working with everyone from sort of the American Red Cross to, this one lady who's my favorite, who started a cat nonprofit out of her living room, to brands and corporations who are looking to run large-scale, meaningful social impact campaigns through social media. Where I plugged in was I was our director of nonprofit services, so I was working with that sort of range of the 1.5 million nonprofits in the country on how to run social impact campaigns. But as we've grown larger, I sort of had my fingers in all different pieces of that. And so I'm really excited to be here. The sort of democratization of giving is something that's near and dear to my heart. The transformation from philanthropy being something that is this large-scale, inaccessible thing to giving $5. I gave, during my years at Causes, I've given more to nonprofits than ever before in my life, because it's way too easy. Tax season is going upon us. But I also think that there's a larger trend going on in the democratization of lots of aspects of philanthropy and changing the world. So whether it's sort of me never being able to imagine that I could have an impact on the world, being able to have these online tools that suddenly, maybe giving is the thing, and donations and fundraising are the thing that's going to make the change. But maybe it's getting 1 million people to stand up and say something about a certain issue. Maybe it's saving a park, or maybe it's stopping global poverty. It's all of these different issues. What kind of things can people on a grassroots level do to get together and do something about it, and trying to make online tools that make that easier. So I'm really excited to be here and look forward to answering your questions and seeing if I can help.
Great. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Sansone. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Better World Books, and I'm a Fuqua 92 alum. I wanted to say that I've sat in your chairs, but actually I didn't, because your chairs are way nicer this year and less plasticky than the chairs I sat in. So yeah, class 92, enjoyed my experiences here quite a bit. Fuqua Vision, right at the beginning of it, you guys have that now. I think that's a big deal, right? So go to YouTube, the black and white ones are the ones on. But CFO of Better World Books, have been there about 4.5 years. Before that, I had worked at really just large corporations. I started after Fuqua at IBM in Research Triangle Park and lived in Cary for 6 years and worked at RTP. And then moved to Atlanta with a company called Scientific Atlanta, which was a broadband cable equipment manufacturer, and was acquired by Cisco Systems. So I became an employee of Cisco and a VP there for a few years. And then found Better World Books, which is headquartered in Atlanta. So our story from Better World Books perspective is we've been in business, this is our 10th year. It started with 3 college students who were at Notre Dame after they had graduated. They had found a bunch of books laying around their apartment, and so they said, we've got to get some beer money, so let's go to the bookstore. Went to the bookstore, and the bookstore said, we'll give you $1 for that biology book and $5 for that other book. And they were like, I just spent $150 like 4 months ago on these books each, right? So why are we getting so little? And they're like, well, that's just the price. So they, right at that point, Amazon, Half.com, eBay, Libris, that was 2002, was opening up. They're opening up markets so you could sell books straight on the web. So they took all their books and they found, wow, I could sell this biology book actually for $60 on the web, and you know, an idea was hatched. They had already done some student initiatives with a literacy center that was associated with Notre Dame called the Robinson Center. It's in South Bend, affiliated with Notre Dame. So they went to the Robinson Center after graduation, 3 of them, and said, we have this idea, we want to run a book drive at Notre Dame to support the Robinson Center. We'll split the proceeds 50-50, but we just need some office space and some web connections. And they go, well, we have a conference room that's empty, you can take that. And basically they raised $20,000 for the Robinson Center to 3 students by putting cardboard boxes out on the Notre Dame campus over the course of the end of the semester. They said, don't take your book back to the bookstore where you can get $1. Once you put it in here, we'll sell on the web and we'll split the proceeds for the Robinson Center. So then they entered a case competition at Notre Dame through their, and Fuqua and other schools have these kind of business school case competitions for alumni. Then they won first place and got seed funding, and they were off and running. And they started to do college campus book drives all over the country. So now actually we do drives at about 3,000 college campuses. And then in about 2005 or 6, a public library system came to the company and said, hey, we heard you guys do something with used books. You sell them on the web. And we said, yeah. And basically, the idea was born to support a institutional problem that library systems have, which is weeding and feeding their systems. If you have the library that came to us was in Gwinnett County, which is suburban Atlanta. They had 20 different locations, and they couldn't wait for the quarter sidewalk sale anymore. They couldn't wait for the Friends of the Library groups because they had just a systemic problem, and that wasn't their core competency. So they came to us and said, we can get you truckloads of used books. And we were, wow, that's really solving a problem for them systemically, because they also didn't have recycling contracts, which the company had at the time. So now we have about 3,000 library systems across the country that send us books every day, used books. And they go into our warehouse in Indiana, which right now there's about 70 people working on a conveyor system that they have an infrared scanner in their hands, and they're looking at the back of a book with the ISBN, and that is hitting our proprietary software system that says whether we can sell it on the web, or do we have 500 copies of that book. We probably can't sell it. Maybe one of our 100 nonprofit partners that we've grown over the time since inception might want that book. So we'll donate it to those organizations, or 3, we'll recycle the book. So either way, the book stays out of a landfill and gets reutilized. So at this point, 10 years forward, we'll probably do about $65 million in revenue. We have about 400 employees between Atlanta, which is our headquarters, where I'm based, in Mishawaka, Indiana, which is right next to South Bend. We have a 300,000 square foot facility there that processes 150,000 books a day, 30 million books a year, something like that. And then we also have Better Books UK, which we said, you know, this is a systemic problem in the United States. What other English-speaking countries can we branch out to? And so in 2008, we started Better Books in Edinburgh, Scotland. And that is now an organization of about $7 million revenue and about 40 or 50 employees. So I'm really excited about this panel because we can go through a lot of how giving has to scale, and what are the different elements that companies and organizations go through to figure out how to make the most with the least, and how to make the biggest impact in utility. So I'm excited about this.
So my name is Sonali again, and I'm with Kiva, and I'm really excited to be on this panel with these amazing individuals. I am not on the founding team of Kiva. I've been with Kiva for 2 years, and it's been an amazing 2 years, so closer to employee maybe 82. Kiva's now about 100 employees. I want to mention we also have this amazing volunteer base, so we have interns in our office, part to full-time, about 20 or so at a time, and then we have an amazing fellows program with volunteers out in the field, 4 to 6 months working with our partners, and there's about 30 of those at any one given time. So even though I say 100, it's really, like many other nonprofits, it's an even larger team because of our volunteers who are out there, which is cool. So I'm the director of product on the lender side. So what that means is my team manages our online product for our lenders. Also, what we do with corporate partners. So I know there's some conversation about cause marketing. So we do have some partners who come to us and want to partner with Kiva. So that's another thing my team manages. And then online revenue. So we're a nonprofit. Every time you make a loan on Kiva, we ask for a tip when you make those loans, because guess what? Microfinance is really expensive. And although we work with partners who are doing a lot of the work, obviously there's an organization to support there. So we manage our online revenue, and then we're trying to get really good at analytics and optimization, so we just started a team to really get more metrics around that. So that falls into my space, but I think what's really inspiring is really, I don't want to, in a really good way, the other side of the business, which is really working with our partners and the people in the field, the borrowers. Right now, Kiva in the last 2 years has actually changed a lot, so I'd be excited to talk to any of you about some of our newer programs, including Kiva Zip, which is our experiment with real peer-to-peer lending in Kenya and the US. And also, we're working more with experimental partners, so non-microfinance, traditional microfinance organizations, or microfinance organizations who really want to try to make an impact with riskier innovations. So, for example, solar energy, agriculture, all those borrowers have really different needs than maybe traditional microfinance, and we're working with a lot of different firms in the field. Kiva does about 7 million in loans a week, so every day basically raising about $1 million, which is awesome. We have about 900,000 borrowers that we've helped, and about 850,000 lenders, and hopefully there's people in the room here who are Kiva lenders, who will become Kiva lenders. So thanks.
Thanks for going through this. So we have some questions that we want to get to, but I want to open it up first to the audience. If there's anything that yes.
I would love to hear you all talk about expectations from participants in your various programs. Why do people use either Don't Choose or Kiva? And when they do for Kiva, what do they expect? Because it's different than a regular microphone.
So with DonorsChoose.org, I think from an individual perspective, so we have two revenue streams. One is individuals, people like all of us who go to the website and make a donation of $5 or $500, whatever amount they want. And then we have the second revenue stream is our partnerships with corporations and foundations. I head up our team that works with corporations and foundations, but to answer your question, I'll talk about the consumer donors, people like us. And I think they're coming to us for a number of reasons. Basically, the whole premise of the panel, which is at DonorsChoose.org, they have choice. When they go to the website, they can search by geography, they can search by subject area, they can search by keyword like yoga, autism, salmon, whatever floats their boat, they can search. So they have choice, they have accountability. So if you're giving $5 or you're giving $500, you're giving to a specific project, and you're going to hear back from that teacher and his or her students in the form of thank you notes, digital thank you notes, and digital photographs. So you know that the $5 that you gave to the class trip going to China actually happened because you heard back that they indeed went to China and what happened in that experience for the student and the teachers. And then lastly, they're given because of the transparency. So you see on every project at the site, there's a project cost report, which clearly outlines every single thing the teacher is asking for. So if they're asking for books for a classroom library, it has spelled out every single book that the teacher wants. So when you're giving $5, you know what your $5 is going for. As Sonali was saying, we also have something called an optional donation to support operating costs, which is what is fueling our organization. And donors see that, and they can choose to elect to include the optional donation or not. 90% of donors do, but I think it's ultimately that transparency that we give people the choice to include it or not, and we show them what it looks like. So I think those are the choice, the accountability, and the transparency are the reasons why people are using and excited about giving at DonorsChoose.org. And regardless of the dollar amount, it's not just for, it's not just as Susan was saying, reserved for if you're giving $5,000. If you're giving $5, you're getting the same treatment as the $500 donor.
So go ahead. No, I was actually going to clarify, just to make sure, were you talking about people who come to the website to make the donation, or were you talking about consumers of the actual product? I just want to make sure that I understood.
I was asking about people who come to give, but I'm happy to hear it either.
Go.
I was going to say, this is one of the more fascinating questions that we've been dealing with at causes, because we've had over 180 million people take an action on causes, but that group is very, very different in terms of some of them could have just seen something on their Facebook profile, clicked on it because they liked it, and then because they said, yeah, I like puppies, done. And but what does that mean in terms of their long-term dedication to the goal of animal rights? There's a big, big difference. And so we've been trying to figure out how to make it incredibly easy to lower all those barriers by, and we really think a lot in terms of how to use the Facebook platform to get people to tell their friends about it and get more people to bring their network into it. So about 50% of the actions taken on the site right now were somebody asking their friend to do it. So it's not direct from us or direct from a campaigner. It's sort of that peer-to-peer sharing of the action. So, but I think that the key that we've found is a lot of the things that Missy was talking about is that the organizers that do really well in terms of their campaigns, and we've had to coach nonprofits, we've had to coach individuals, and we've definitely had to coach brands and companies about the best way to do this, is about sort of working people up that ladder from, yeah, I like puppies, to, great, what is the issue here going on with dogs in your county? And then what can you do about it? Is it a donation? Is it a petition? And how to work people up that ladder. We found particularly in online organizing, a great way to sort of work that ladder is bring people in through sort of an issue-oriented campaign. Maybe it's a video or a petition that's easier to understand. So it's, you know, how many dogs are being euthanized in your state? And maybe there's a really compelling piece of media about that. So you bring in a lot of people around that issue. Maybe you get a couple million people to watch that video because it's incredibly easy on the platform to get people to share that. But it's absolutely key that once they watch that movie, their action is not done. They get a follow-up email that next week that says, now that you've watched this video, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to start a fundraising campaign? That might be even down the line. So like video petition, super easy. Then maybe it's a letter writing thing, or maybe it's watching another video that's a little bit more wonky and detail oriented. And then maybe it's, you know, after we work people up that ladder, then it's asking for a donation. But creating that clear sort of campaign calendar from something that's super easy and low barrier to something that's a much higher barrier, like pulling out your wallet and making a donation, is something that we've seen work really well. So we've had campaigns that started with you know, just a video and have raised, you know, millions of dollars. So they're and I think it's that key is they may not have that expectation when they watch that video for the first time that they're entering into a big campaign, and that's okay. We want to make it really easy at first, and then once you've brought them in, to sort of work their way up, because they may not have that expectation at the beginning. We'll get them there.
So Better World Books is a certified B corporation, so actually a little bit different. We're a social enterprise. So the way we give is and across many different categories. So we give by donations of funds. So every book, the brand promises every book that we sell will go to donate a nonprofit literacy partner or someone who's promoting literacy, like a library system, for example. So Duke is a client of ours and a partner of ours. So Duke Library System will give us books. We're successful and we can sell those books, we give funds back to the library system, and then Duke can also pick a nonprofit partner like Durham Reads or something local. And so we end up having like a dual commission structure for every check we sell. If we can't, and the example I gave earlier, we donated about $13 or $14 million in that vehicle since inception. And then from a book perspective, if we don't think we can sell that book, we end up partnering with over 100 different nonprofits to actually take the books and receive them. So from an interaction with our customer perspective, you know, we try to be as transparent as possible. So either the client, like Duke, can go right now online and see what books they've got available for sale that were sent to us, and be perfectly transparent on what commissions they're going to get from a literacy impact standpoint, as well as downstream, what is the nonprofit going to receive from the sale of those books. We're a little bit different again because we're a social enterprise. So, you know, we work trade shows and people will come up and say, you know, here's $20, put it towards literacy. I'm like, I was at Cisco and no one ever gave me $20. But we also have if we don't have anything tagged to a sale of a book that we get, like we have new books and some other things that don't have a literacy component tagged to it, we put it into a literacy grant fund. And so our customers actually vote once a year to say what nonprofit deserves literacy grants based upon their merit. So they actually apply to us through a grant process. So again, the promise is that every book we sell, no matter even the recycling component, we consider those sales, goes to benefit a nonprofit or literacy program. So we try to be as transparent as possible. You can go to Better World Books on the website right now. It's got a ticker that says how much we've actually donated today, how many books we've donated today.
So I will try not to repeat what some of the other panels said because we certainly have a lot in common. Actually, Kiva joins a call with Donors Choose Global Giving and Charity Water every 4 to 6 weeks, and we share learning. So, some things in common is definitely Causes done really well with social and using Facebook, and we have a lot to learn from them in terms of that, but that's where we do get a lot of growth. So if your friend is sharing on Facebook, we do get a lot of traffic, so do make a loan, share it. And with Better World Books, something about education is really powerful with people, particularly in the US, although we're finding that more and more lenders are coming from all over the world, even though we don't market all over the world. 40% of our new users are actually international users, which is interesting. But what attracts people, I think for Kiva in particular, we do have a 99% rate, so once people get it, it takes some education to understand that this is a loan, not a donation. You get your money back, at a 99% rate, you take some risk, but you don't get tax receipts. So once people understand that, I think the reason they come to Kiva is just to be, and these other organizations, is to be part of something bigger than themselves. Even if you don't have a lot of money, as some of the panelists mentioned, you can participate. So we have about 20,000 or more probably self-organizing teams and groups who are encouraging their friends to come and join Kiva. A challenge that Kiva has is that a large proportion of our inventory supply, these loans, are not the borrowers speaking for themselves. So where Donors Choose, you have a lot of teachers who are able to bring support from their community. And with a lot of these crowdfunding or those types of platforms, you'll find out that a lot of the businesses on Kickstarter, those projects, they start with people they already know. And then maybe their loans reach a tipping point, or their donations, their fund campaign reaches a tipping point, and all of a sudden strangers start to contribute. But really, it's almost like they need that social proof first from people they already know. So that's actually, for Kiva, it's relying on the other lenders to bring more people in. But I think the broader message is, just helping the world and being part of a community that's global. Our lenders have been to an average of 11 countries. That is more than our staff. Wow. So we certainly get to people who don't get to travel and want to use Kiva's experience, but we were really surprised to find that our base had actually traveled a lot, and they were actually looking to keep connecting with traveling global communities. So that's an interesting tidbit.
Paul, did I understand correctly that Better World Books is a for-profit program? So my question for the other three panelists is, can you imagine your organizations functioning with your same social mission, but as a for-profit?
We actually are a for-profit as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, our board has posed that question to us, and I think we just feel like at our heart, who we are as a nonprofit organization that's able to apply a lot of business practices to the way that we do our business. So we feel like we are absolutely doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're specifically should be situated as a not-for-profit. We've had that conversation probably a couple of, every year some board member brings up, could we reconvene DonorsChoose.org as a for-profit, and we decide, no, we want to leave us exactly as we are, focused on our mission of serving the most high-poverty schools in the U.S. So we've obviously entertained and decided we are who we are, and we're right now supposed to be 501c3.
Have your discussions, you've decided to stay where you are, but have discussions, do people feel that it could work as a for-profit?
Yeah, we haven't taken it that far to really push it, but because of the way that we operate, I think many of our board members who represent highly successful companies believe that we're delivering such high results that we could easily be operating as a for-profit. But we haven't gone down so far down the path. That's a great question.
Absolutely, great question. So Kiva, as it is today, couldn't function as a for-profit. The reason we're able to do what we do with this mission is we're all about connecting people. So we're not, really selling securities. We don't have a profit motive, and that's the basis for our mission and what's really allowed us to scale and participate in micro lending, which you can imagine in all these different countries have a bunch of regulations and transparency. We want to follow all that, and being a for-profit really lets us stay true to that mission. Now, maybe with some future, I would say never say never, but I can't really imagine Kiva, even with some of the new crowdfunding, there's Jobs Act, there's going to be a lot of for-profits that enter this kind of crowdfunding space, but I think for Kiva, we're excited that those models will bring in investors who are excited about profit, but we hope that that will then lead to just people being more comfortable with crowdfunding in general, and those with kind of a motive around social good will then come to Kiva.
And I think, just to add, it wasn't cut and dry that Better World Books was going to be a for-profit in the initial stages anyway. So I talked to our founders, and they struggled with selecting to be a nonprofit versus a for-profit. And I think at the end of the day, what I basically heard from them was they thought we could be more sustainable and make greater impact being a for-profit because we control our own destiny to some extent. We're reliant on grants just to get going, and really thought that the product offering that we had, cheap used books through third-party marketplaces initially, and arbitraging books basically, right, created value, but we could be more sustainable over the long term and make actually a greater impact, being for-profit versus non-profit. That's a great question.
Yeah, I should just mention, Paul, there are other organizations and companies that are trying and have tried to do microfinancing, similar to what we do with for-profit models. So Prosper, Microplace, there's a few that you can look up and compare. And I think Kiva's managed to scale a lot faster in a lot more countries.
We also definitely dealt with that decision-making model as well. We were lucky enough to have investors that understood the long-term vision, but I think we couldn't have done that if we didn't. The first, definitely several years, people were saying, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of platform approach? Who's going to use this? And so to say, the revenue part came later, which I think is a really interesting part of these tech investing, is we'll prove our model, we'll get a ton of people to use it, and then we'll worry about revenue models later, is a crazy way to start investing in a new venture, but that we were lucky enough to be able to sort of experiment that, and when we were able to prove that we were scaling up incredibly quickly from the beginning, it made our investors much more likely to keep skin in the game because of that. I think without the scale in the beginning, we would have had a hard time proving that the revenue would have come later. So,
Thank you. Yeah.
There's a lot of nonprofits who are doing amazing work, but they're really struggling to leverage their websites and social media to be as effective as your organizations are. In your minds, what do you think they're not getting right, and what can we do as students to kind of equip their leaders to be more effective in this space?
I'm looking at Susan first. I just try to let her all up so I don't have to live up to anything. I would say Kiva has really stepped up kind of the social media platform, online platform to a sophisticated degree in the last 2 years. So yes, before that we were social, but probably not to the degree that we are now, and that has spurred growth. So I think it takes investment and time. I mean, I go to the Facebook campus and talk to the people there. I'm looking at the latest changes that all of Twitter and Facebook are making. That being said, there's a cost, integrating, especially for a nonprofit with these guys who are changing things all the time, and for their 5 or 10%, it's not a big deal if they're changing things. So it's a matter of really ROI. Yes, you could be social, but I don't know that investment is worth it for every nonprofit, right? Because at the end of the day, we decided to grow in the last couple of years a lot in terms of our lender base, and that's supported by social media. But if user acquisition wasn't kind of a top strategic priority, then I don't know that we would have invested so highly in it. But another thing is definitely just talking to other nonprofits about social, it's a necessary necessary way to keep staying fresh. Because also the things you did a year ago on social, they're not necessarily working anymore this year. So you also have to, have that fresh message and stay on top of it.
Right. Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I think that the time-tested approach of trying something new, A/B testing it to see if it works. If it doesn't work, cut it. If it's working, go forward. That type of fast iteration is something that a lot of nonprofits that I've seen be very successful is something that's sort of really core to what they're doing. And I think a lot of nonprofits struggle with finding the metrics that's going to measure this. They'll say, oh, we'll experiment with this for 6 months or a year. We'll hire a consultant to advise us on this and then evaluate if it's working later. And I think that's not coming soon enough. So okay, if I'm going to try this, what's the metric that I'm going to tell if it's working or not? And then when am I going to evaluate it and be able to make that call about whether I'm going to cut it or whether I'm going to keep going? And setting that up from the beginning of everything, whether it's I'm going to try Twitter out for a bit, or I'm going to try Tumblr out for a bit, or I'm going to, whatever it is, that sort of before you try that experiment, being able to assist nonprofits with that process of how are we going to know if this is working, because I've seen that be a really key difference in the nonprofits that we work with, the ones that are just rocking it in the social space as well. And then I had one other point, but I forgot it. So.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add to what Susan and Sonali are saying, which is we had a similar situation with Sonali in that we really, probably 1 to 2 years ago, really pushed hard on social media in large part because my team is hearing from the corporations and foundations that we work with that it's absolutely integral to our partnerships. And we've won partnerships with major Fortune 500 companies, and we've lost partnerships because our social media presence wasn't where a company wanted it to be, and it was critical to the partnership. So 2 things, I think. One is we've invested in having a full-time staff person, and for us it's in the form right now of like a fellow working on social media. Social media is not something you can do once a day. It's something someone has to be on all day long. And so I think for a nonprofit, particularly one that's in an area with a lot of college students, it's a great opportunity to say, you know what, we should try to get a grant to get a college student to come in and serve as an intern or a fellow who can really try to push the needle on social media, as Susan was saying, and like we're going to give it a really hard go for X period of time and then step back and evaluate. But that for us has been like game changing. You have to have someone on it pretty much 24/7. And the second piece is like really thinking hard about what's your reason for having social media. And for us, there's a real engagement piece of it. It's the way that we're engaging our constituents. It's how we're engaging our donors. It's how we're engaging our teachers and our corporations and foundations. And one of the really awesome side benefits, I think Sonali was talking about this, is our teachers are serving as our fundraisers via social media. They are sharing their projects on Facebook. They're sharing them on Twitter. They're getting the word out about their own projects. Then we also see teachers throwing out questions in Facebook, in Twitter, and having other teachers respond to them. So it ends up forming this really interesting community, online community that would have never been forged. So I think thinking about like what's your organization's reason for having both a web online presence and a social media presence, and then if you have an interest to push hard on it, hire somebody. The last thing that I would say is, and you can hire a college student for not a lot of money, so it's worth taking that step, you know. And then the last thing is don't just think about Facebook and Twitter. Pinterest and Instagram are big pushes for us now as well.
And one other thing I remember I was going to say.
Good, yeah.
Is one of the biggest things that you can help a lot of nonprofits with is thinking about social media from the consumer standpoint. And I find that that's something that's really hard for a lot of organizations, especially ones that have been functioning for a long time. For example, they'll start a new campaign and be thinking about it from we have to have this completely finished and polished and approved by all of our partners before we push it out. And when they finally get it pushed out, I asked the people in the room, would you send this to your own friends? Like, would you hop onto your personal Facebook account and send this to your friends? And That's a little worky. Like, probably not as much. And that social media sort of like keeps campaigns honest in terms of if people won't share it with their own friends, it's probably not going to take off on that. And so being able to offer that perspective of, you know, I know what I share, I know what I like to see on Twitter, I know what I like to see on Instagram. And so if this isn't fitting in that, it's probably not going to work, is a huge part of it. Because I see a lot of great campaigns that have amazing content, but it's not being thought of from why would someone want to share it, what's their motivation. And so that's a huge part that I think you can talk about.
Yes.
So I'm curious how you balance with your donors and constituents this sort of helping build capacity for sort of day-to-day provisioning of services, which is very feel-good, with more systemic change, which I'm thinking like Donors Choose and Waiting for Superman. It can be more divisive. How do you manage that balance?
That's a great question. Thankfully, I think you know, Waiting for Superman is one example of where I think we've taken a foray into a situation that was, you know, potentially, depending on who the audience was, more political than not. Thankfully, the benefits for that sort of outweighed any potential costs in terms of people learning about DonorsChoose.org because of our partnership with Waiting for Superman. And obviously, many of you have probably seen, but if you haven't, there's a movie called Waiting for Superman that sort of portrays some of the challenges going on in public schools across the country and the desire for charter schools in particular. And there was obviously a lot of managing of and responding to teachers' questions about our involvement in that. But at the end, what we would be able to tell our teachers is, look, this is drawing more attention to the work that you're doing. And frankly, our teachers are, we believe, some of the best teachers in the country, otherwise they wouldn't be using DonorsChoose.org. And we can then play a role in engaging people in a way that's productive, particularly for the average person who reads things in the newspaper and is like, oh gosh, what do we do with these public schools? And we are a simple way for people to make an immediate difference. No one in this room would write a $5 check or a $500 check to Durham Public Schools because you think, oh my gosh, this is going to go into a vacuum and what will absolutely happen to it? But you could easily go on our site and search by Durham and search by arts or science or music, whatever you're passionate about, and find a project in Durham Public Schools and get excited about it. So we see those opportunities as opportunities to engage and educate, and then to take those opportunities and get people involved in schools through our platform. So we've been fortunate in that example. We've really been able to take advantage of it and to engage more people in how they can better public schools rather than just saying, oh, like this is a mess that can't be cleaned up. What do I do? And throwing their hands up.
How do you think organizations can balance the trend and the power of crowdfunding with the need for financial planning and financial flexibility? Do you think that crowdfunding is best suited for startup funds or special projects, or can it ever play a significant role in funding daily operations?
Yeah, I think I talked a little, and I think Sonali did earlier, about the, in our model, we have it built in so that when someone makes a donation, they have a choice to contribute the optional donation. The companies and foundations that we partner with do not have an option, and we're very upfront with them about that. So it's built into our model to ensure that we never have to go to a company and say, hey, will you help pay for my salary or the salary of one of my colleagues, because it's built in. That's been the way we've been since our inception. So we don't know anything different. It obviously makes our job so much easier because every time we partner with a corporation and foundation, it goes back to, we can enter the conversation around what are the goals that you have. Is it around customer acquisition? Is it customer loyalty? Is it employee engagement? What do you want to accomplish in a partnership with DonorsChoose.org? We can start the conversation in that manner, and we can ensure that however we build the partnership, it meets the company's goals. So for that, it's been, for us, tremendous.
I'd say that for most nonprofits right now, and even most sort of activists that are wanting to do something, and companies that haven't done this type of work before, crowdfunding is not yet a reliable model for most of the programs that they're doing, particularly long term. I think that an engaged online community that's reliably giving at a reliable rate is a long way off for a lot of organizations, and they're trying to think about that now. But without that sort of, I've got this community online that gives frequently, I don't think that you can rely on that at all. So I do think that if you've got it built in, like these amazing examples here, built into what you do, and they have actively, and I think these examples are incredible about organizations that really dedicate to that online community too. They know who those people are that are giving a lot, and they really make sure their experience is good. But a lot of the organizations that I've worked with, that's not core to what they're doing right now, and they do have to make the decision about whether that's worth it or not, whether they want to. Because as of right now, if you're sort of hopping on Twitter for the first time, or hopping on trying to make an active Facebook community, but so far you're hearing crickets, like getting to a reliable crowdfunding for a long-term model, it is definitely not there yet. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but that's a big jump to make.
I think you just have to be able to demonstrate where the lines are going to cross at some point. We've got enough scale. So, like Federal Books, I mean, we're different because we're for-profit, but we lost money for our first 7 years of existence, right? So we had to go to NASDAQ, we had to go to a lot of different things, angel funding, right? But you got to be able to figure out where that line starts to cross, where you're covering your fixed infrastructure, and then whatever your value you're bringing after that starts to drop, right? It starts to drop to the bottom. So crowdfunding or other sources, it still has to be kind of thought of. When are you going to cross the chasm? When are you going to get past that point of the scale?
This is kind of, it's funny thinking about crowdfunding because it's kind of meta. Because Kiva, we're supported by crowdfunding to some degree. 60 to 70% about of our operational revenue comes from our online lender base. Another part is from grants, donations, bigger grants, partnerships, and things like that. So Kiva, the platform, we are able to operate in these countries thanks to those donations. But we want to continue to experiment and take on, innovations and doing new things. So there's more risk tolerant, capital that we might need with partners who have other goals, and they can help us do really, really edge boundary type things. And then we're a platform, so then, like Kickstarter, there's organizations on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all these things, and I think that those platforms are best suited to, a community or like a comic book seller or something like that has maybe a small base in their local area, and they can now market to a broader area. They'll at least have some support base, and this is their way to scale and to grow. Sometimes it serves as kind of a marketing platform more than, hey, I've never done a business like this. I mean, sometimes it does, but often it's something that's visually appealing on these different networks. So it really depends what you're doing if you're thinking about small, medium-sized business. But I do think crowdfunding in general is best right now for small, medium-sized businesses. As you get bigger, there's things like, maybe you don't want to share with the world what you're doing and your strategy. You have privacy concerns and other things that might make it more reasonable for you to go after other equity plans.
If one of us in this room identified some kind of niche and wants to start a new digital funding platform, what would your advice be to get some kind of new platform into what survival mode and into scale to be something that could be sustainable?
Wow, if I knew that question, I would be off. It's going to be a crowded space, so I would personally, I wouldn't get into the space because it's crowdfunding. I would start with what are you actually trying to do? Like Kickstarter, they have very curated, specific projects that they're trying to do. Indiegogo is even a little different. You have to think about whether you're kind of a pre-order type model, or you're a donation-based crowdfunding model, or equity maybe sometime in the future a little more, or I think I don't know if that rewards type model. So there's a lot of different questions that really is based on what are you trying to crowdfund. I don't think there's one answer.
Yeah. I would almost say think like a grassroots organizer in that way, like find what your niche is and who the community is that's going to really wholeheartedly embrace what you're doing. Causes grew up at a very weird time where Facebook was just like growing like crazy, and we happened to be in a time, so a lot of our growth was really scattered, which was really unique. I think that most of these platforms start as, it's an arts crowdfunding or it's an education crowdfunding. So you're really, and then you know who your key players are in the head. It's the people that are going to go on every day and really feel the need for that platform. But then keeping an eye on why it would spread and who you want it to spread to. But I do think that you sort of have to think of like an organizer in that way, or who are the key constituencies and how to really make your product serve them so that they've never seen anything that's that great before, and what are you hoping them with.
And there's a lot of, for the platform itself, there's a lot of transparency and accountability choices that you have to make. And so there's a lot of risk to entering that space.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about transaction costs. Coming from the philanthropic world, I know that we would often raise money, and if people didn't really give it a certain level, it actually would lose money. And so how do you think about that, and how do you kind of balance these small donations with the need for some larger donations from that perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. From our perspective, the $5 donation is just as important to us as the $500 donation, and from a cost perspective, that's not an issue. The $5 donor doesn't have any adverse effects on our program versus the $500. So, I mean, we obviously are constantly trying to balance. Like, we obviously want more and more $5, but we absolutely need to be balanced by the $500 to $1,000 plus donors. And so we're acquiring them through all different means, through teachers who get their friends and family to donate, through the gift cards that companies like Facebook give to clients and customers. So for us, it's a balance of like depth and breadth, right? We want to grow the donor base, and we also want a wide range of donors at all levels, because at the core of who we are is we're about democratizing philanthropy. And so so thankfully, because of the model, we're psyched about the $5 donor, and we want them coming back year after year. For us, the more of the focus is on the renewal and getting those $5 people and the $500 folks to come back year after year. So for us, I think we're really more focused on the renewals and engaging the customer to come back time and again within a fiscal year, and then fiscal year after fiscal year.
And we have sort of from a technical standpoint a $10 minimum due to sort of credit card issues, but it was mostly, I think the benefit of these online tools is that you can find cheaper online alternatives to some of the things that we were doing offline for bigger donors before. So let's say, even the sort of thank you letters with a stamp in the mail is like, I'm totally fine getting an email instead of that. Or if you make one video that's like a personalized thank you so much for donating video and send the same thing out, great if it can be personalized, but if you've got, strapped for time and funds, like send the same video out as long as it's heartfelt and shows the impact, awesome. So I think that they're looking around for sort of like cheaper online alternatives to some of the traditional things that have made donors feel good. But I think that's a great way to search for online tools that are going to work, which is what are we doing offline that is the reason that people have been coming and giving back again, and what can we do online that might kind of mimic that, but for cheaper and at a more massive scale. The other thing that I was going to say is, Missy talked about this earlier, but asking people to give at certain levels. So, if you just ask me to, donate to your venture, I'll start thinking like, oh, okay, well, I'm all strapped for cash right now too. So maybe like as low as possible to, make me feel okay about the fact that I actually gave. Whereas if you sort of motivate me in a different way, which is if you donate at this will happen or you'll achieve this impact, I'm much more likely to give at a higher level because of that. So I think making sure that you're working those price points in all the fundraising fields can be huge.
Maybe an analogy for us, since we don't have donors, we have a lot of customers, but we also focus really hard on the lifetime value of the customer. Right? So your individual transaction might be a loss at that point. For example, we sell books at a loss sometimes just to attract customers, but we also focus on, well, wow, how quickly did they come back, and what was their card size when they came back, and how much did they check out? And we can say, what's the lifetime value of that customer over time? So individually, sometimes you do get transactions that are incrementally dilutive. But we try to focus on the long term to say we really want to develop a relationship with our customers and folks that give.
Plus one. We kind of talked about it a lot, but each loan we make obviously has costs, and so it's not necessarily the amount, just because I think that the online platform, and we're doing payments and settlements with countries all over the world, so the transaction cost of the actual loan and donation kind of pales in comparison to the operational costs of, getting the payments, working with our partners to get the payments and mortgages. But we do face the challenge of, I think what you were talking about, is the recurring customer, and sometimes people are even using their repayments or often to make another loan, but in that case they're not necessarily making another donation. But to us, each loan may cost money, not each person, lender looking for.
So I love all of the philanthropic side of things and filling the need, but I'm wondering to what extent are your organizations also potentially dealing with the systemic political side of that need? So for example, like the DonorsChoose.org, obviously you're filling a huge need for teachers to have resources, but that's not sort of addressing the question of why don't teachers have resources in the first place, or with the sort of microfinancing happening around the world, what does that speak to about sort of the political issues and social issues of the microfinance sort of field? And are you finding yourselves involved in that side, or just sort of addressing the immediate need?
It's a great question. We just last summer hired a data scientist for the first time. We've got more data than we know what to do with, which is a great problem to have. But we really believe that we can make that data available to whether it's boards of education, superintendents, about trends that we're seeing at DonorsChoose.org with the hundreds of thousands of teachers who are engaging in our site, so that we can play a role, but play a role that's appropriate for us, which is letting cities and schools and districts and states know about what are teachers requesting. Why do we think they're requesting these things? What might that mean for curriculum? What might that mean for choices that districts should be making or states should be making about how they're allocating funds? So I think that's a really appropriate foray for us to be stepping into, because we can take the data and frame it and capture it in a way that's really helpful for these partner organizations. And it's appropriate for us because we're not making statements, we're not making a political statement, we're not getting involved in lobbying. We're letting our partners know what we're seeing with all of the thousands of teachers across the country who are accessing us and what their needs are. So we're really excited about being able to take a bigger step in that direction.
Yeah, Kiva's evolved a lot in the last X number of years, 7 years, 6 years, and we do have to pay attention to the crowd. So, but there's this balance between a lot of new users who are just kind of casual do-gooders, for lack of a better word, who come to Kiva and they don't want all this deep information about the social impact that they're making in the world, but they just want to know and trust that I'll take 5 seconds, this is convenient, I'll make a $25 loan, and it will do good. And then we balance that with, Kiva's made up of employees, right? All these employees come to work at Kiva because of the mission and because of the social impact they want to make. So internally, we really are working on a lot of new initiatives to really focus on how can we make our social impact bigger and bigger. And initially, like when we started, we're working with a lot of MFIs, who are these big banks, and we still have those partners, what we're doing. Now we're to the point, in the beginning, any MFI that wants to work with Kiva, work with us, we want to work with you. And now we have a very sophisticated team that does due diligence, and really we're asking partners to focus on riskier loans with their Kiva capital. So what that means is we're trying to focus our capital, which we're not charging any interest rate to the partners and borrowers. We're trying to focus that money into new areas where microfinance may not be doing everything. So for example, farmers who, they have very seasonal profits from their, business, which is farming, or students who need a longer loan term. So we're trying to go into those areas, to your point, to one, make a bigger social impact that's connected to our patient capital, risk-prone capital, but also to educate lenders more about it. But we have to strike a balance of not over-informing customers who come to our website, and we don't want to take them away from making a loan. And so you'll see in the next coming months a lot more focus on educating lenders who are interested about these innovative, socially impactful loans and partners. This is all reliant on these amazing partners who are being able to work.
I'll just say one thing, this is maybe a little bit off of what you were asking, but one of the things that I really hope changes in the future with a lot of this democratization of giving and a lot of these online tools is more collaboration. And so like one of the big things to get political things happening is there need to be more collaboration between people working on the same issue. And with a lot of the sort of offline or old school or more traditional approaches, you wouldn't like send a paper mailing out about another organization's campaign. Like that just would not happen. But with the sort of bringing things online, since it's so much quicker and easier to send things, you can cross-promote a lot of campaigns a lot easier. And in fact, you're just keeping people, you're keeping your Twitter audience or you're keeping your Facebook audience more engaged and more informed about other things that are going on. And it's been really hard to sort of break through that barrier because, and the times that I've seen it a little bit happening, it is producing great impact, but I think it's really hard to break out of that, like, but that's what they're doing over there. We've been competing with them for funds for decades, and so we can't help each other in that. But I think the online space is a really interesting way to start seeing more of that because there's a lot more benefits, and it's sort of the ethos of it between like tweeting and retweeting is that's sort of that reciprocal relationship is kind of the community that's been based, that those are the sort of the ethics of that community online. So I think that can be a great lesson that hopefully a lot of organizations that are working for political change can use the online tools for. So.
Our passion is literacy. I'll just be real quick, but I think one of the things about literacy is that it's a global issue, right? So we don't get involved so much on the political side of it, but we kind of strategically look at it from a business perspective and say, do we have profit? We have nonprofit partners across the world attacking it in the worst areas. So for example, we went out and sought organizations in South America. We looked for Asia. We started with Books for Africa originally as one of our nonprofit partners. So what can we control? You talked about the political piece of it. What can we control, and what we can strategically do to say, where can we make the most impact? I think the worst literacy rates in the world are in Asia and Africa. So how do we make sure we have nonprofit partners that are on the ground? What are they doing? How can we best support them to try to fight it? So it's almost not so much a political component, but how much of a control can we start to make an impact in the fight against it?
You all must have read my core questions because a lot of them are being answered right now. Any other questions?
I'm very concerned about the ways that the work you're doing affects people-to-people stuff. For instance, library sales used to be a really big community event. They would involve dozens and dozens of volunteers. There would be hundreds of customers. You would see your neighbors. You'd thumb through. It was like a big community event. It built community. And of course now when you go to the library sales, most of the volunteers are over 70 or, same thing with education. It used to be that when a school needed new gym equipment, there'd be a group of parents who would get together and there'd be 40 of us and we would get to know each other. Similarly with community organizing, not so much with Kiva. And I've been doing this kind of work my whole career. I'm really concerned about how we're bowling alone or whatever it might be and what we're losing. We're maybe gaining money and that, but what are we losing in terms of our neighborhoods and our communities?
It's a great question. I think the schools that we primarily serve are schools where the large percentage of kids are on high free and reduced lunch rate. So I can tell you 20 years ago when I taught in Baltimore, Maryland, 3rd and 4th grade, there was not a parent who could volunteer in my classroom or volunteer at the school level. And now there are tons of people engaging in my old school, PS 145, Alexander Hamilton, who never would be able to engage there. I mean, I'm a faithful donator there because I'm passionate about that school. I see donations from people who said, I went to PS 145 back in the 60s. I love being able to give back to my school. So the schools that we're primarily focused on are schools where parents are working hourly wage jobs. They're lucky if they get to the school for the parent conference. And we really believe we're informing and engaging people outside of that community to play a role in that school. Now, on the other side, my kids' school, the teachers frankly don't want to use DonorsChoose.org. They have an engaged PTO that's giving them lots of funding, and it's working for them, and I still think they should be using DonorsChoose.org. I'm trying my hardest, but I think we're serving a real niche there, and the thank you notes that we hear, that we see, the written ones and the online ones from kids around the country, always to some degree are like, I can't believe someone like you would care, about me. And so these are from communities where kids are rarely given things, or they feel like they've got the leftovers. So I feel really good that we're actually creating a new community, or new communities. They just happen to be online because frankly the resources aren't there in their own community. And that's the current reality. So it'd be easy for us to say, oh, well, that should change. Well, I can tell, having taught 20 years ago, that things haven't changed that much, unfortunately, in 20 years, that community has transformed itself. So I feel good that we're providing, I feel like we're doing the absolute right thing. And I also know, being at the school where tons of parents are absolutely engaged, that that's still happening as well.
I think it's a great question. It's interesting you bring the issue of the quarter sidewalk sale. Actually was one of the systemic reasons that the libraries came to us, because they saw their friends of the library group shrinking in size. Right, so I'm not sure the social reason of that, right, so I'm not going to pretend I know that, but these institutions saw those groups shrinking in size, and the librarians would say, we can't wait for the sidewalk sale. We have so much, they told us horror stories of coming back to the library at 2 in the morning to take the books that they couldn't fit anymore and putting them in the dumpster, because they didn't want people to see them throwing the books away. They felt terrible about it, but they had no space for the new volumes that were coming in, and they couldn't wait for the annual sale from the press group that was literally shrinking in size and aging. So there was a systemic problem. So what we've tried to do, I'm not saying we always offer up the library. You keep what you want for whatever sidewalk sale you want to do. That's your election, okay? But what else can we do? So we've trademarked the Great American Book Drive. So we actually do book drives in cities now. We've done it in Chicago, Boston, and try to bring communities together. We offer days of service. Great American Book Drive. So we actually have done that with many library systems to try to bring communities together. We offer days of service for our own employees. So literacy projects, we actually have literacy trips that we try to partner with. Always send our employees with our nonprofits internationally once a year. It's a big thing in the warehouse. Pick your name out of a tumbler, and you're going to Asia for 2 weeks with room to read. So we try to foster that, but it's hard. I mean, there's some social reason why maybe some of those friends groups are literally aging off, and maybe it's because there's online communities being sprouted, and their time might be spent donating in other areas.
I would love to make communities, because this is like. It's interesting because we haven't quite alleviated poverty yet, what we're working on. But another core part of our mission is really connecting people. So I'm jealous of these offline communities and all these activities where people are really connecting face-to-face and one-to-one. And I would say, I hope we can encourage that. Now, one way that we're building community, to their point, is, now somebody in Kenya is in a community with someone in Australia, which is true for a lot of these online platforms. That's a community that never existed before, or even funding that never existed before. But we also, encourage talking to the teams that I was talking about, the self-organized teams. There's one in particular that hosted a conference and flew out to Kiva, and we talked with all these people. 30 people came for the weekend, and we're talking to them. We also are launching Kiva U, so we're doing more focus around university, college, and high school students, and working with teachers to develop curriculum that they can bring into their classroom. And obviously, a lot of these students wouldn't necessarily be lending at the elementary school level, but they might be able to, collect funds and learn about different countries. So I totally empathize with your point, and I think that's connecting is kind of both what allows us to do what we're doing, because people lend to people, not to, some other amorphous thing. There was some survey about, public aid goes to countries, but this private aid, they go to people. And so there's kind of this world where they fit in together, but that does rely on connection. So it's not always in-person connection, but I think in general we want to build this connection. We certainly don't want to take it away from people, because that's what we rely on too.
Great question. We have time for one more. Yeah.
Some of you mentioned that you were the first in your organizations, and I know some of you are for profit, but how was it like at the beginning of the organization, getting it going? I mean, getting people involved, and what's the spirit? How do you manage that? And how do you get more people involved? I know that when you have something on, then it's growing, and then it's easier to attract people. What is it at the beginning to like build something, like really get people motivated and interested in working for that kind of organization?
Just jump in. It was really exciting, but wow, did we not know where we would end up when that happened. So I think a lot of it was like finding the first people that were very passionate and enthusiastic to go out there and really, pound the pavement and get people excited about your vision. As much as sort of numbers were growing online, we were having equally as many sort of like in-office visits where someone was coming in because they had to, but by the end of the meeting, they walked out feeling inspired about what we were doing. And so the time that we spent in the beginning sort of defining that pitch and making it really make sense and tailoring it to whoever was talking to was incredibly well spent. But I think that it also, one of the things that was most important at that time was making sure that any partnerships that we were making, we were adding as much value as we were getting. There were a lot of organizations that as we grew, we started saying, like, can you do this for us? Can you do this for us? We're the new guy in town. And I know, I'm sure these guys, as being successful in their field, get a lot of people coming to them saying, hey, we're doing this thing, so obviously you want to help us. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we learned early on is that, that's not how partnerships work, and so we needed to figure out what we were going to bring to the table. Otherwise, we were getting nowhere with sort of partnership conversations, because people will not do it. Even in the nonprofit world, people will not do it just on goodwill and just sort of help out the new venture. So what are you going to provide from the get-go that's going to add to the equal partnership?
I was going to say, it might be obvious, but lead by example. So when we were smaller, we have 2 big rush months every year when we're shipping textbooks to students in January and August. And that's our peak seasons, January and August, right before semesters start. We have a base business and we have 2 big rush months for textbooks. And so, I'm the CFO, but earlier, in our early days, we had huge capacity constraints with people actually packaging books. So for that month, my team and whoever else I could grab, we were out in the warehouse, with sweatpants on, just boxing and shipping and being with the shippers all day long for 3 weeks, right? So there's a component of leading by example. Lead the folks that you think how they would want to see a leader react, and being with them fosters that camaraderie and spirit and the joint, the joint goal of being something bigger than one person.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump off what they've said. I think a key for us is since day one, like just Susan said, when I joined, we had no idea that we were going to be a nationwide organization open to all public schools in the U.S. And obviously that's where we are today. I think part of what has been really helpful is setting our yearly metrics and measuring them basically on a real-time basis since day one. So at any hour of any day, we know exactly where we are against all of the various targets that we're measuring, from dollars delivered to teachers that we're serving to students that we're serving, and being really relentless about those metrics has played a huge role in us being able to take risks, but also be able to make really informed and smart decisions about what are the next steps we can take and what are the right ones to take. So I think that's been a really critical part of our growth.
We just have a couple minutes. I want to offer any closing remarks from you all to the students or to anyone else in the room.
I would just say thank you guys for your amazing questions, and you're welcome to contact me to follow-up questions. I did bring some flyers from our Kiva Fellows program, even if you don't see yourself volunteering right after business school. I think just add some context the conversation. As far as resources, if you want to learn more about Kiva, we're just excited. And we have the Kiva Fellows write a blog, and I find those the best, and they're online. You can read about our different partners, we're everywhere. And then, like I said, we're launching this Kiva U initiative, but you can read about that in the coming 3 months, and it's going to be if you're interested in education. It's really exciting. But if there's any other questions, for that.
Just a few quick points. Thank you for coming and asking these questions. It's really been a great session for me. It's been great with all of my colleagues up here. It's been a great discussion. I would say enjoy your time at school if your students still here, because you don't realize how high energy, smart people like you are all at the same place for 2 years, and get the most out of those relationships, because they're your network going forward. And I remember when I was looking to go to Federal Books at Cisco, I called 4 guys from business school and said, here's this crazy idea that I've got on the table in front of me, and they really want some bounced off ideas. And it was, I don't know, 15 years after graduation. And so enjoy your time here. And then as you go through your careers, just find impact. Right? So always question, what impact am I making every day? Because if you go into a role and you lose that, it doesn't become very fulfilling. So make sure that you're testing yourself to make sure you're making it.